3 categories, 1 keyword: reserve. Joint reserve, length reserve, and speed reserve. Improving these categories makes the sport of football easier to perform, allowing you to display your God-given abilities without injury. Reserve refers to the capacity you have in demonstrating a quality. So for football, let's consider the joint reserve we'll need for different positions: a lineman sinking back into a set, a running back making a cut, and even a quarterback setting to make a throw. All of the end joint positions are remarkably similar, so it makes logical sense to train those joints at those specific ranges so that the athlete can maximize their comfort and athleticism in their sport. But is there any benefit training outside of those ranges? What is joint reserve? The greater capacity a joint has in expressing each degree of its range of motion, the greater likelihood it will tolerate any range of motion. Putting this in simple terms, our joints get built up and protected when they're stimulated using a full range of motion. For the knee joint, this specifically means more muscular development, more cartilage development, more meniscus development, more synovial fluid saturation, all of which translates directly to greater joint protection in shallow ranges of motion. It might not look anything like the demands of the sport, but it makes the demands of the sport easier to accomplish. Let's take those same positions and then consider the muscles involved. What is length reserve? The greater length you can activate a muscle, the easier it will be to generate forces at shorter lengths. Per the Titan theory of muscle contraction, you develop more muscular stiffness at longer muscle lengths compared to shorter muscle length. This causes adaptations in that muscle to give you more force production at shorter lengths. Now let's take these same athletes and consider the max horsepower they have to move quickly on the field. What is speed reserve? The greater your max speed capacity, the greater your endurance at slower speeds. To put this simply, say you have 2 athletes pitted against each other in an endurance drill. Let's use football gassers as an example. Athlete 1 runs a 40 time in 4.7 seconds and can reach a max speed of 19 miles per hour. Athlete 2 can run a 40 time in 4.5 seconds and can reach a max velocity of 21 miles per hour. Now the football gasser gives a speed demand of 13.7 miles per hour. The skilled players need to maintain at least that speed if they're going to make it through the drill in under 16 seconds. Divide drill time miles per hour by max speed miles per hour for each athlete, and we see that athlete 1 needs to exert 72% of his max speed capacity, while athlete number 2 only has to exert 65% of his max speed capacity. So getting a little personal here, I was athlete number 1. I would work my tail off to pass these tests. I even remember going on family vacations, mapping out training routines specifically for the purpose of crushing these tests. As I gave every last bit of myself to get in shape, it seemed like the best athletes on my team could keep up with me without breaking a sweat. It was just physics. I felt like I was running a 400-meter run the entire race, while the best athletes seemed like they were on a leisurely stroll. I thought being the best at these drills would make me into those athletes, when instead I peaked as a sophomore and was outclassed and outsprinted by underclassmen my senior year. These athletes weren't lazy, they were just fast. The key then is getting an athlete faster. Let's put it another way. Let's say athlete number 1, the slower one, is lined up at the wide receiver spot, being tasked to run past athlete number 2 at cornerback. Athlete number 1 is operating at 100% effort, accelerating his way only to around 12 miles per hour during the first phase of his post route. Again, let's do the math here. Athlete number 1 is absolutely crushing himself, and athlete number 2 is operating at laughably only 57% of his max speed capacity to cover athlete 1 during the first phase of his post route. What feels like the hardest thing in the world to athlete number 1 feels like a stroll in the park to athlete number 2. Athlete number 2 doesn't even have to try until the play is 75% over. It reminds me of Over the Hedge, where the squirrel takes the energy drink and everyone else is just in slow motion while he's just walking around because he's moving so darn fast. To recap, we have joint reserve, length reserve, and speed reserve. After around 7 years of studying the human body, how it adapts, responds to training, I find that these are the key differentiating topics to what makes not only football players, but any athlete stand out. And what I want you to think about as I go through the training routine I'd use for football players is how all 3 of these concepts are interrelated. The more joint reserve you have, typically the greater length reserve you can achieve. The greater joint and length reserve you have, the greater potential you have to demonstrate strong, powerful, and fluid sprint speed. And the more that you can put your body through the forces of those high sprint speeds, the greater all of those structures adapt long term. Enough talking. How would I apply everything that I said here into an off-season training program for high school football players? I'd structure 2 sessions per week, and I'd have 2 different sessions cycled each week. Session 1, day 1, would be warming up with a sled if you have it, or simply running forwards and backwards if you don't. 20-yard increments 5 times down and back, increasing intensity by 20% each round. Then we'd move right into our top speed, spiked up sprint work, getting the body to experience immense amount of forces, magnitudes greater than one's body weight. Faster you go, the more forces you experience, and thus the more adaptation for your calves, hip flexors, hamstrings, quads, glutes, basically your entire body. 4-second sprints with a 10-yard fly with 3-minute rest, and for competition, have their training partner put a marker down and have them try to beat it for the next rep. Then once we are warm, we can begin working on our route running. During graduate school, I actually found a way to reverse engineer the skill of route running by examining the best route runners in slow motion. And I'm continuing to refine what that looks like so that anyone can get on the route to become a better route runner. This is the simplest I've gotten it yet. There's 20 total foot plants depending on the foot, hash, and pattern that's ran. So from the right hash, we have a right foot plant in pattern, a left foot plant out pattern, a left-right plant in pattern, a right-left plant out pattern, and then to get more space between you and your defender, we have hesitations and jabs. Hesitation, right foot plant in, hesitation, left foot plant out, hesitation, left-right plant in, hesitation, right-left plant out. Then for jabs, we have jab left, then just continue on your pattern. Then jab right and continue on your pattern. To get the other 10 route combinations, just go to the other hash and repeat the same plants. And obviously, as you continue to progress, you can then begin combining these plants as you begin to perfect the basics. I would literally start week 1 just walking through all of the plants, increasing by 10% intensity to the extent that the athlete can perform those routes perfectly. Then I go right into the weight room. Upper number 1 will be chin-ups. The greater capacity you can pull your body weight in space upward, the greater likelihood through juice in your arm swing that you'll be able to propel yourself outward in space. Throughout all my searching and study, it's amazing how much the basics work, but the basics need to be done well. I used to do chin-ups with no control, partial range, just for the sake of getting a lot of reps. Now I can own my own body weight and more, exploding up, shoulders to fist, hold 1 second, down 1, 2, 3, pause, and repeat for 5 reps. Basics goal is 15% body weight and an additional load, working towards a standard goal of 20% body weight, then a freak athlete goal of 25% body weight for the same tempo. Explode up, pause, down 1, 2, 3, and attempting to get that for all of those 5 reps. As you can see, even this challenges me. So the beauty of a training program like this is that it all scales. There's always a way to improve. It's just according to physics. And then we want to get equally strong going the other way with the dumbbell incline press. Again, same thought process, but the load is coming the other direction, getting length and strength through the shoulders, elbows past torso, fists to shoulders, and then press up. This gives you more joint reserve in the shoulders, more length reserve in the pecs, giving you greater force potential for any overhead activity. 17.5% body weight as a basics goal, 20% body weight as a standard goal, and 25% body weight as a freak goal. Coming down 1, 2, 3, pause 1, 2, explode up, hold, for all of those 5 reps. Now on to the lowers. I'd work that functional knee position that we saw was consistent among all of those athletes with the Poliquin step, a move pioneered by Olympic strength coach Charles Poliquin, a movement that directly develops the ACL and the meniscus. I tore my meniscus my senior year of high school, dropping to the ground my last practice before my last game as it caught on me during a change of direction. I thought the key to my recovery was avoiding this weakness. So research shows using this exercise in particular to confront the meniscus allows you to develop the meniscus protector, the VMO muscle, vastus medialis oblique muscle, the most fast twitch of the quad muscles, which offloads to connective tissue during those changes of direction. Elevating the foot makes it harder, as does using weight. But as you can see with this and any of the exercises I show you, they all scale. So the strongest person on your team to the weakest person on your team to begin making progressions to the health of their connective tissue, the strength of their muscles, and their long-term athletic potential. Form cues are off leg foot pointed up, lowering down 1, 2, 3, kiss the heel, and press up on the working leg. Basics goal is 20% body weight, an additional load in each hand on a 6-inch box. Then a standards goal of the same weight on 8 inches. Then a freak goal of bar and back, 50% body weight on 8-inch box for all of those 10 to 12 reps. If you can easily get 12 reps, then it's time to go up in weight or height. And if you can't get 10 reps, you need to lower the height or the weight. We want to balance the body accordingly. If we're strengthening in a partial range of motion on one leg going forward, we want to do the same thing going backwards with the reverse hip thrust. Compared to a barbell hip thrust where the load is hardest at the top position, here the load is hardest at the bottom position. Maximizing glute development as well as joint space of the hip, having more access to the hip means greater capacity to use the glutes in space. Same progressions and end goals as the Poliquin step. Form cues are opposite leg extended, toes pointed down, bend the knee, hips behind heels, tap the off leg's toes, and press up. So we started with uppers, we worked into the lowers, the hips and the knees. Now it's a section I would have never thought of training, the ankles. Yes, the ankles. This isn't some sort of rehab drill or just balance training. This is progressive overload to the muscles behind and in front of the ankles. You wouldn't fire a cannon from a canoe, neither should you be stacking the plates on your squat or deadlift until you can own straight leg calf raise. 2 seconds down, 1 second pause, explode, 1 second pause at the top, and then repeat for each rep. This movement improves joint reserve of the ankle. The ankle joint moving within its full flexion, extension range of motion, making it easier to express athleticism at functional ranges. Improving length reserve, less adhesion and restriction from any of the tissues in the calf that could be limiting maximal efficiency of the Achilles tendon muscle tendon unit. I remember using big jump stretch bands to try and get relief from my ankle soreness and shin splints that I had to endure because I did not apply progressive overload principles to this area, which would be 12.5% body weight for the basic goal, 17.5% body weight as a standard goal, and 25% body weight as a freak goal for all of those 12 reps. It's crazy. I can own so much weight on my ankles now, and success leaves clues. Some of the most athletic individuals on the planet have the freakiest ankle ability, but this is probably the most simple training program you'll ever see. If you can guess what's next, balance the body accordingly. We just worked this side of the ankle. Let's train the front of the ankles. You have a muscle that runs from the bottom of your knee to the inside of your foot called the tibialis anterior muscle. This muscle is directly responsible for picking the foot up and maintaining an arch of the foot. It could be easily the most overlooked muscle for the treatment of shin splints. The stronger you get this muscle, just like your bicep, you can imagine the less force is experienced by the joint. If your hips are the motor, your knees are the suspension, and your ankles are the tires. You can have the horsepower of a Lamborghini, but if you have the suspension of a Honda and the tires of a bicycle, the car is going to rip itself apart. I wasn't a Lamborghini, but I was at least a Ford, so I was ripping myself apart because I had the suspension and the tires of a bicycle. I was not respecting physics based on how I was training, but it did not have to be that way. This is the tibialis bar, a device that allows you to progressively overload the front of the ankles just like you do the knees and the hips. 20 reps for a basic goal with 12.5% of your body weight, then a standard goal of 17.5% of your body weight, then finally a freak goal of 25% of your body weight for all of those 20 reps. 1 second pause, explode up, 1 second contraction at the top, and then repeat for all of those reps. And then finally, finishing session 1 will be a brief mobility session. Instead of doing a ton of tiring mobility drills, what I wish I would have done was respect physics and progressively overload even my mobility work. Let's take a couch stretch, for example. This movement gives you length reserve in the quadriceps muscle. The quads span from the top of your knees to midway up the pelvis. So we flex the knee to get stretch here, and then we extend the hip to get stretch there. Now we have a measurable way to determine how much length reserve you have access to in this muscle. The less length, the less your body will trust you outputting a ton of force through this muscle at functional length. This is because there's more resting tension in the muscle. Increase the stretch by getting the ankle and the thigh flush against the wall. Decrease the stretch by leaning forward, squeezing the glute, putting stretch on the front of the quads. Count in breaths rather than seconds. Think 5 to 10 breaths at a time so that you shift your body into rest and digest so you're not forcing through any range of motion. And the same thought process in something like the pancake stretch. Widen your legs far enough so that your torso can fall down. Here we're getting length reserve in the hamstrings. These muscles span the knee and the hip, so we do the same exact thing but opposite motions. Flex the hip and extend the knee, and we have a measurable way to determine how much length reserve we have in the hamstrings. The less length, the less likely your body can output force at those shorter lengths. This is because there's more resting tension on the muscles. Try to maintain a flat back and lower more of your weight forward to increase the stretch. You can also elevate the hips to give you more leverage to lower down into the stretch if you're particularly tight. That's it. That's day 1, week 1. I'm putting the other sessions in separate videos simply because there's not enough space in my laptop to post in one video, but they'll all be together in a playlist.